Welcome, everybody. Another week, another webinar. Here we are, another important topic nonetheless. We're here to talk about methylation, and not for the first time. So if you guys haven't had a chance to check out our prior webinars, we're basically turning this into a series at this point. Then we'll go ahead and put the link in the chat box there so you guys can check out the ones that we've already done. So we've gone over some pretty interesting stuff when it comes to the methylation cycle itself. And of course, the genes involved, because this is functional genomics, this is DNA code, and that's what we do. So tonight, we're going to be speaking about it kind of in the vein of its relationship to epigenetics, right? And it's a really interesting relationship between these two things because epi is a Greek word that means like above, right? So we've got your genes, but then we've got this epigenome, and it's really how the genes are actually expressing themselves that give the cells of your body their identity and makes them do all of these different things. So we're going to get real deep on that tonight, methylation and epigenetics. Joining me is the lovely Dr. Laura to talk about this. Dr. Laura, welcome to the webinar.
Well, hello, and thank you so much. Justin, I love working with you. I mean, the information that you have, just, those quips, love them. You do so much for so many clients, not just in helping them directly, but in general education. And I appreciate that so much. And I am so happy to be here again. And all of you out there, our audience, and even those who will listen on the recording, thank you for being here. We really are here for you. And we are here to give you information to help you have better health, have a better life, enjoy more, biohack the crap out of stuff, do what you can to absolutely embrace the joy, the bliss in your life. And part of that is what we're doing here tonight. So, and you've done a brilliant job in previous webinars and podcasts and everything else talking about methylation. And I know that, we've already started popping those links in the chat. Go back and listen to the brilliance, because there's just way too much to put into just one webinar.
Definitely. It's one of the more complicated topics that we cover, and that's why we really try to break it down the way that we do and relate it to different topics, because it's truly an all-encompassing biological process, and it's happening every second, thousands of times per second, as a matter of fact. So, the way that I describe it is that your DNA really is your hardware. So that's what's built in. That's something that you can't change. However, your software, remember, epi is above, so it's the more superficial layer that we're discussing here, that can be changed via your input, right? So having high quality input is going to give you better cellular expression. And I think that's really what we're all after here, the best quality cell expression. If you guys haven't already, if you wouldn't mind taking a second to just fill out our questionnaire, that way we can sort of direct our conversation a little bit more today. And then we'll pull it up and we'll get into it. Dr. Laura, since you're a super nerd and I love you so much, maybe just give a quick primer about the methylation cycle and epigenetics and kind of what we're talking about as an overview, and then we'll get right into the weeds.
Well, really, methylation, this, like you had said, Justin, is a critical process, a critical biochemical process in the body. This is where methyl groups, okay, 1 carbon, 3 hydrogens, they are added to molecules like DNA, proteins, enzymes. These processes, as you have already alluded to, they occur actually billions of times per second in your body, playing a very key role in many physiological functions. For example, specifically about epigenetics, that on top of, above the manipulation of the DNA, methylation is central to turning genes on and off. Methyl groups attach to the DNA, they influence that gene expression without changing the underlying genetic code. That is what epigenetics is. And this helps to regulate cellular activity, determine which genes are going to be active at any given time. So when a gene is methylated, when DNA is methylated, it is silenced. And, proper methylation really ensures healthy gene expression patterns. And, this is the foundation of those patterns for biological aging. Our DNA aging test, that is what it's looking at. It is looking at what are the patterns of DNA methylation in your cells, in your body. Of course, we also have a section on telomere length, but DNA methylation really is the gold standard when it comes to that. But so many other things that methylation is a part of. It's a part of the detoxification system. It's a phase 2 detoxification pathway, helps the liver process and eliminate toxins, heavy metals, a lot of different things. It also helps with neurotransmitter production and regulation, because it actually contributes to the production being made and the breakdown of neurotransmitters like serotonin, dopamine, norepinephrine. All of these things regulate mood, focus, sleep, overall mental health, which is something we're going to touch on this evening. And it also works in hormone balance. Okay. It's involved in estrogen metabolism, energy production. Okay. Methylation supports the function of the mitochondria, okay, the energy producing centers, in the cells, because they do help the production of making ATP. All right. Immune system helps to regulate the immune system by modulating these inflammation and promoting tissue repair. Nutrient metabolism. Methylation activates and processes certain vitamins like B12, like folate, okay, which you've dove into, talking about the full, deep dive in the methylation cycle. It helps with repair and growth because methylation aids in the repair of DNA. This helps the body recover from stress and damage at a cellular level. And this is especially important for maintaining long-term health and preventing disease.
Yeah,
So,
and methylation is really, it's not good or bad, right? Like we want a balance, just like I talk about with all these different systems in the body, because like if you're at a baseline a hypermethylator or at a baseline a hypomethylator, that's going to present some problems because we don't want all of your genes silenced. Not that it would, but we don't want all of them expressed, nor do we want all of them silenced, right? Like if you had a tumor suppressor gene, well, you're not going to want that to be shut off, right? So you actually don't want that to be over methylated, but an oncogene or something that might be a promoter of the growth of certain types of cancerous cells, that might be something that we want methylated so its expression gets turned off, right? So we're kind of talking about two different things. There's the methylation cycle itself, for which we have a great pathway that we do on the DNA 360, getting that dialed in so that you're not hyper nor hypomethylating your genes helps a lot with achieving that homeostasis that I don't shut up about ever, because it's really important to know that genes are really context specific, and some of them you do want upregulated and some of them you do want downregulated. So getting the methylation cycle right is a very important thing. I'm wondering if we have that questionnaire pulled up, if everybody's had a chance to fill that out yet. There it is. Lovely. Okay, so we asked a few questions here. So the first one that we asked is, what age range best describes you? There is no one in our audience right now that is under 30 years old. That is very interesting, or at least nobody that answered the poll. 13% of you are between 30 and 45, 31% of you are 46 to 60, and then 56% of you are over 60. Okay, so we've got a pretty good idea of our demographic tonight. Interesting. Really, there's not a single person in this audience tonight that's under 30. That's unbelievable. But age is how you feel, right? So take your DNA aging, and maybe a number of you are actually below 30 when it comes to the actual biology. So the second question that we asked is, how familiar are you with methylation and epigenetics? 2% of you said you've never heard of it. Well, now you have. So welcome to the club. 69% of you said you know the basics, but you want to learn some more. And then 29% said that you're familiar and you're just looking for some advanced strategies. So we'll definitely be getting into some of those later tonight. The third question is, have you experienced any of the following symptoms that could relate to poor methylation? 50% of you said fatigue, low energy. That is so common. We see that all the time. I've experienced it. I'm sure you have, Dr. Laura. That's very common. Same with this next one, brain fog or difficulty concentrating. I think that methylation plays a huge role in your ability to deal with like neural inflammation and things that can affect cognition, anxiety, mood swings, again, all the time. We're running into these things clinically daily. And 35% of you said that is the case. 62% said detoxification issues, and that can manifest in a ton of ways, skin stuff and brain fog once again. So that's definitely, prevalent here. And then 12% said none of the above. Great. I hope that it stays that way for you. So the fourth and final question is, what is your main goal for attending this webinar tonight? 25% said learn how methylation affects my health. Great idea. 38% discover actionable lifestyle strategies. 21% said understand how to optimize nutrition for better health. Nutritional pathways very important for methylation. And then 15% said learn how genetic testing can help to personalize my health plan. Whew, interesting stuff there, Dr. Laura.
Oh, absolutely. And, we see this all the time with our clients, their goals, what they're, wanting to achieve, knowing their DNA and, working in the programs that we have. So you're not alone. We have seen this, we have dealt with this, and we also have had success stories, not just, for ourselves, because I've done it too. I've gone through this, I've had brain fog and low energy and all of these things. And it's, what I did to turn it around, but then learning what we have, turning around, educating others, teaching them, and then seeing the same type of results. So,
yeah. And I really think that, yeah, definitely. I think that the combination of testing that we offer here being like the functional genomics, DNA 360, and then adding in the DNA aging is a pretty interesting combo, because they're really two sides to the same coin. Like if you look at functional genomics and you look at your genotypes, well, that can really give you some indicators as to where your baseline weak points are, right? And then if you kind of combo it with stuff like the DNA aging, you can see how your body is actually methylating and what your methylation patterns actually look like. Right. So the combo of those two gives you a lot of actionable insights as well. We operate under the assumption that if you have suboptimal genotypes for any of these given systems, that, yeah, it's likely that your body is going to be suboptimal in that area. So that's an area that we need to reinforce. I have a weird anecdote about when I first got my DNA 360 that I'd like to share, because the first thing that I did was I looked at my methylation cycle on my genes. And I had this weird problem. I have no lab work to back this up whatsoever, but I was getting these warts on my hands for like a year and a half. And I had no idea where they were coming from. I had a big one on this finger. I had one on my palm. A second one started coming up on my finger as well. And I was just like, I have no idea where this is coming from. And the first thing I did was I got my B vitamins right. I went into my methylation cycle and I actually got everything kind of dialed in the way that the DNA 360 suggested. And I had been putting apple cider vinegar on there and choking it off with duct tape and all this stuff, and nothing was working. And all of a sudden, a couple of weeks after I got on the specified vitamins that I went through with the DNA company, my body just went, and all of the warts just disappeared after a year and a half. Like my hand, they haven't come back. They were completely gone. So I don't know for sure, right? This is not anecdotal. I'm just saying that correcting that cycle can have trickle down effect that's absolutely unreal. Like it's going to correct a lot of different things in your body. Have you had any experiences like that, Dr. Laura, with like correcting someone's methylation and having it manifest in like weird ways?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. For my personal story anecdote, which by the way, I love yours, in the fact that you had such specific a situation and you saw such a dramatic change.
Yeah.
Some people, it's not that dramatic. It's over time. Mine was with energy. I mean, the stress of going through grad school, of dealing with chronic pain, because I was in a car accident, on a lot of medications, a lot of surgeries, and before, and after I got off all of that, but just that chronic pain, that it just is very, very taxing. And this is where a lot of the fatigue, brain fog, that increased stress was just almost insurmountable. And when I learned about my DNA, and I understanding that my methylation pathway is shite, and yes, my MTHFR, I've got a few other things that are not so helpful. I started specifically in targeting B vitamins, focusing on the whole foods, beef liver capsules, the red meat, eating the foods, salads and different things. Not that I was never a bad eater. I mean, I was a pretty healthy eater, but focusing on those B vitamins made a huge difference. I mean, my energy level, my ability to focus. And I know that a lot of that was also my ability to start detoxifying my body from all of those medications I had been on, from all of the stress I had been dealing with, because stress is a killer. And that will affect so many things. And it's the same reflective situation for a lot of my clients. The stress, the lack of energy, their inability to detoxify very well. First we have to identify where the toxins are coming from, because you want to lessen that load. But the supporting of the detoxification pathways, methylation being a huge one, can make all the difference. As significantly acute of a situation like yours, but then even more long term, over weeks and months, just feeling so much better, being able to poop regularly, being able to just live your life, and it can be absolutely amazing.
Yeah, definitely. It looks like you're getting some love in the comments from people that have worked with you. So that's it's always great to see. And yeah, so there's really not a single cell in the body that this isn't going to have a positive impact on when you get it right. It's like we've got all of these environmental cues, and they sort of enter the epigenome, and then you get these phenotypic changes that come as a result of that. And it's worth noting that every cell in your body really contains the entirety of the DNA. It's just that the way they express and the epigenetic regulation channel is what makes your cells behave so differently. And that's a really crazy thing to think about, that your skin cells and your heart cells have the same baseline DNA in there, but these regulation channels and these on-off switches are what make them have their own identity and behave in their own way. So let's say that you have a really poor quality of input, right? And you have mold in your house and just pollution and toxins in your nutrition. Those are all environmental cues that you're giving your body, and it's going to cause a phenotypic change, right? So that's why we have to have a high quality of input in order to have a high quality of output. I think that the fact that these things are reacting every single second to what you do means that you have to have a certain amount of things in place. And when we look at functional genomics, that's what gives us an indicator as to where our body is always going to go back to that poor expression or suboptimal expression, right? So as an example, if you have a suboptimal GSTP1, which we talk about as far as respiratory tract detox, and you've got a location with a lot of mold or pollution, well, now you've got both things working against you. You've got a suboptimal genotype and suboptimal input, and that's going to add to the totality of your body's toxin load. That toxic burden is going to be significant, and that's where we see brain fog and gut issues and all kinds of things happen as a trickle down effect. So I really think it's about knowing your blueprint and then understanding what the lifestyle factors are that can actually influence it.
Yeah, I mean, okay, we're done. That's it. That's everything. So one of the things that we had brought up when it comes to mental health, behavioral health, Um, a lot of that I have found can be impacted by poor detoxification pathways. Um, it can be very heavy to try to figure out where to begin. What do I do first, especially when someone is in that state of depression, overwhelm, anxiety. And I want to let you know that if you happen to be, anyone listening happens to be in that state, or someone who is, understand that there is hope. There are ways and there are things that can be done to help. And this is part of that. This can be part of that knowledge of understanding what you're working with so you can start turning the correct dials to start feeling better. And, it's not just women who deal with this, because, we have spoken about on several webinars on women's health and, how there's this unfortunate stigma, when women are having a difficult time. Oh, well, they're just women. They're just, on their cycle and all this other stuff. And it's like, no, there's way more to it than that. And it's not just women who go through it. Men deal with it too. And I was hoping that maybe you could provide a little bit of insight about that, kind of opening that door, for men. They don't always have to put on this strong face and pretend everything's okay, but the first step is to recognize it and then ask for help and know what to do.
Yeah, and I really think that men, a lot of us struggle with the weight that's on our shoulders, but we feel as though we don't have the right to complain about it or to even reach out about it. There's sort of a stigma, like you say. It's perceived as weakness, and we're taught that ever since the school days. That we can't reach out if we really feel anxious about this or that, because to an extent, men aren't supposed to be anxious, right? We're supposed to be stoic and we're supposed to just sort of face it. I've had a lot of clients that have anxiety issues, and I've found that really their minds are going faster than their circumstance. Like they can't ground themselves and really be in that present moment. And so their brain is going 100,000 miles an hour, but they're just sitting stationary. And I think there's a lot of different reasons for that. I always tell guys, you have to move your body. You have to use it for what it's built for. Like if you're not weightlifting, if you're not competing in something, like you have to do these things because your body is meant to do that. And your mind is going to go really quickly if you don't ground it and get into that actual, action. Raw action typically solves all in my experience. You have to take action. And if you don't, then your mind is just going to run away on you. But I think that there's a lot of other stuff going on as far as micronutrient deficiencies, I think is pretty common. I think that gut problems are really common as well, and that can definitely impact your neurotransmitters. I think a lot of us have too much toxic burden as well, and it's causing brain fog and different things. So it's like, again, we have to find ways to ramp up your detox pathways. We have to make sure that you're nourished. We have to make sure that your hormones are balanced and that your cortisol and your growth hormone and your insulin and all these things are operating within homeostasis. If not, you're going to just wake up every day feeling that anxiety that just won't go away. Then it's psychological, right? And I do a lot of psychological work with people because I did it on myself, right? I had to do all these things and go through my own ringer. And once I did that, I arrived with answers for others. So we've got these great things coming up, like these He summits that we're doing, where Dr. Wild and myself are going to be doing a lot of cool little webinars and stuff, really specified for men. Just because, then we have an outlet and we have a place where we can go in a safe space where you're not going to be judged and you can talk about this kind of stuff. What is that weight on your shoulders that's really making you feel this way? And let's let you know that you got some support from other males that have felt it as well.
Yeah, really, when it comes to methylation, when we're talking about the way that it affects the neurotransmitters, the production and breakdown of neurotransmitters that I had mentioned earlier. Depending on how well that methylation works, it can manifest in so many different ways. If, say, if your methylation is not working well, your COMT, which is that last player on the team that puts the methyl group onto the neurotransmitter for breakdown and clearance, say that's slow. Well, then those neurotransmitters are going to be hanging around much longer. Well, it can kind of be a good thing. Again, it's where the good and the bad come in. It kind of is, but we have to look at the context. So say the dopamine, okay, is hanging around longer. Well, yeah, that can be good, because then you're staying in that pleasure reward state longer. But that can actually hinder the motivation, because it's not being cleared very quickly. So it's not making you want to get up and change and go get that next dopamine hit, that you can stay in that state longer. You can get absorbed to the point where you don't really care about anything else. Again, this is more of an extreme, all right? But then on the flip side, say your methylation is working very fast, a little too fast. It's clearing too quickly, and it's not giving the brain enough time to actually enjoy that. And so it's that constant chase to get the dopamine hit, to get that pleasure reward. And in that case, that can be problematic if someone chooses to find that dopamine hit in not so wonderful ways, through alcohol, through drugs, through sex, through, whatever that choice is. So really it comes down to the knowledge of what's going on, not just being a victim in the circumstance into what's going on in your environment, but realizing, oh, okay, this is the way my genes are working. This is my environment. This is my, the way I'm eating. And this is the result. But just empowering them to say, you know what, I can change this. Of course, if they choose to, got to know what their goals are. You got to know that they want to, move out of that current state. But allowing them to know, hey, there are dials we can turn. There are supplements, nutrients that you need to help with this. And then applying that. So important and so empowering. And maybe we can start diving into some of those things.
Yeah, and it's important to know too that sometimes genes have a good and a bad side to them as well, right? Like when we're talking about anxiety, like one of our predominant genes that we look at is called ADRA2B, right? And we measure that as far as indels and deletions. And if you have deletions in there, then you don't process noradrenaline as well as somebody else might. And there's definitely a connection there to anxiety. And I'll share that I am a double deletion for ADRA2B. So that means that I'm really predisposed to having anxiety because my body can't process the noradrenaline very well. So I could be in a certain circumstance with somebody else who has the full version of that gene, and we both lived the same event, but my interpretation of it is way different and way more dramatic. But what we also find is that when you have deletions in ADRA2B, that you tend to be way more of an empath, right? So for me, it's like my mission is just to like manage the anxiety, because me being a complete and utter empath makes me a way better coach, right? There's good stuff that can come with it as well. We talk about it with serotonin as well. If you're dysregulated, as you have an SS, right? So you're definitely dysregulated with the serotonin pathway, but that makes you crazy detailed. Like we're in staff meetings and Dr. Laura's like noticing stuff that I didn't notice whatsoever. And so just know that none of these are a curse, right? There's good and bad oftentimes, and it's just about managing it. I often say that, the universe tends to give every person a gauntlet, things that they have to work through, but it also gives you building blocks, right? So we've got these challenges, we have something that we have to work through, but each and every person also has building blocks to work with. And the best way that you can honor the universe is just getting the best out of your building blocks. And I think that your genes play a really big role in that.
So Another thing that has always come up, especially when it comes to detoxification, and people who have fatigue, low energy, have a difficulty removing the toxins from their body. And I'm going to get into that topic that we love, pooping. This is why I have clients do the food mood poop journal. Part of our ability to detox. And I mean, we're talking about just regular daily, you need to go to the bathroom. This is, our body is constantly making waste, just metabolic waste, just, food in, shit out. That's the way it works. And you got to make sure that shit's leaving because there are toxins in there. And if you're not, your body is reabsorbing that. It's putting more pressure on the liver, and I had mentioned this earlier when it comes to, energy production, detoxification, methylation helps the liver process and eliminate toxins, not just any toxins, but also heavy metals, environmental pollutants, all of these things that we are exposed to and that we are taking in all the time, no matter how precise and diligent we are about eating organic and having all of the things to make sure our water is clean, whether it's an RO system or a distiller or air filters, or we still live in this world. You still have to step outside of your house. You still are going places. If you eat out or anything like that, you're still being exposed. And just the natural processes, we have to get rid of that. And this detoxification of our body is largely accomplished by the production of glutathione, major antioxidant and detoxifier of the body, and it is an offshoot and connected to the methylation pathway. So all the more, of course, we have to support this. And getting rid of that, we got to make sure to be pooping. But I'll tell you, and just a little headliner here, people, you should be going at the very least once to twice a day. That is normal. That is what you need to be doing. If you're not, then need to take a look and say, okay, what do I need to do to make sure I'm eliminating the toxins and the shit in my body? We don't want that there. Okay. Yeah. So this is a major problem that a lot of clients have, not just women, men too. All right. And why? I mean, obviously we have to look at the person in front of us and it can be very specific to them, but there are some general things why people have difficulty pooping. All right. So I just want to dive into that a little bit and talk about how methylation can impact the things that lead to the inability or the difficulty in pooping.
Yeah, it's totally the thing. And I think that gut problems are like really, really prevalent nowadays. And I've noticed in clients that have a lot of stress, they tend to get constipated pretty regularly. And I think that there's a couple of reasons for that. I think one of the main things that happens is that really elevated cortisol levels, it tends to suppress something called SIG-A, secretory IgA. That's like one of the gut's main defenders. And it gets suppressed when you have a lot of stress, and I think that gut issues in general are, the gut is the second brain. 80% of your immune system is in your gut. A lot of us have mucosal barrier issues going on. And I think that if you have suboptimal methylation, that's just one more thing to where your body can't deal with inflammation very well. To your point, you can't get phase 2 detoxification going. And now we've added to it, right? Your body is recirculating toxins, plus it's continuing to take in other toxins. So yes, you need to sweat, you need to go to the bathroom, you need to manage your stress, and you need to have proper methylation with good quality B vitamins, the right types. You need to avoid mold. You need to make sure that you have you're not smoking. I mean, the obvious stuff is really there as well with methylation. All the things that you would assume disrupt methylation do.
And if you can allow me, I would like to dive a little bit into the science, the nerdy part of methylation and defecation, and what's the relationship between the two. So I'm going to reiterate a couple things, because different ways that methylation can affect defecation is through neurotransmitter production and gut motility. All right. So we already said methylation helps to produce serotonin, dopamine, acetylcholine. These all regulate intestinal peristalsis, so that wave-like contraction that moves stool through the gut. And if any of you didn't know, 90% of serotonin is made in the gut. And if methylation is impaired, like an MTHFR mutation, or one of the other gene mutations that are in the pathway that we look at, if you happen to have low folate or low cobalamin, which is B12, folate's B9, or even low riboflavin, okay, another B vitamin, serotonin production can be inadequate and therefore lead to slow motility and constipation. So there's a direct connection there. So when you're talking about dopamine imbalances, okay, and this can also be reflective of the COMT gene, like we were just talking about earlier, or MAO gene, because these help to break down and clear the dopamine. They can also slow down or speed up gut transit time. If you have acetylcholine deficiencies, okay, from poor methylation or low choline intake, that can result in weak muscle contractions, making it harder to poop. All right. So, there are so many different things that methylation does, just in the job that it has for neurotransmitters. But then look at bile production and fat digestion. All right. So methylation supports bile synthesis and secretions through the choline and through phosphatidylcholine, okay, which are both very important for breaking down fats and lubricating stools. So if you are a poor methylator, you can have low bile flow, and then you have hard, dried stools and sluggish digestion. Again, guys, the list goes on and on. This is all connected. So how can we fix this? How can we help the body with methylation? Because one of the main questions that a lot of people wanted to know is, give us some action items. How do we do this? So, Justin, what do you do if someone is not having very good bowel movements? They are having some of the symptoms that our audience had mentioned, and they're sitting in front of you and going, Justin, help me poop.
Yeah, and that's really pretty common, actually. And of course, we have to incorporate all of the different systems of the body, and it's really crazy how often misnomers happen, right? Because, like, to your point, if someone has really poor bile flow, I mean, how many people just go and get their gallbladders removed? And unfortunately, doctors are pretty quick to do that. And the gallbladder doesn't really make bile. It's more of an intelligent storage sac. It knows kind of when to release it. Like, for example, when you take in some fats that need to be digested. And there's also something called enterohepatic circulation, which is like this relationship between the gallbladder and the liver. And bile is like a cycle. It's supposed to be going around and around. It helps your body to clear toxins and digest nutrients. But I have several patients that have had their gallbladders removed, and really it was more likely just a different gut problem, detox problem, methylation problem. So that's why I think this is so important. Doctors sometimes just want to cut stuff out of you before they want to start doing these things properly, So I have this thing that I keep talking about called moving from general to specific. I never start specific, because if I were to start specific, I would just find something that incites diarrhea. right? I'd give you a bunch of baking soda and we talked about this in our last podcast, but there is some nice tonics that you can use that can get things flowing quickly. But that's just the end result of the problem. That's not the problem itself, right? So I go in and I say, okay, how does your gut detox? I look at your GSTM1. How are you methylating? Do you have suboptimal SHMT1? Do you have suboptimal MTHFR, for which we look at 2 different SNPs? Get all of your basics in line first, because then we can move to specific if the problem still persists. I think that getting your diet dialed in matters a lot, because if you aren't a good starch metabolizer and 3/4 of your diet is based on starches, at a baseline, your body just doesn't know how to deal with that particular substrate. So I think that there's a few moving parts to it. But again, we start general and we make sure that you're in alignment with your assignment. That's what I say when it comes to living in concordance with your genes. And then if it's still a problem, then that just means that something has been corrupted off of a lifetime of not living within your assignment, right? So our Gut 360 is a great thing to do as well, because it shows you the different phylobalance, right? And if you have too much proteobacteria, that would be an indicator of a few things going on there, a dysbiosis going on there. We can look at Candida species. We can look at H. pylori species within that. So I really recommend using DNA 360 as well as Gut 360 if you have those kinds of issues. And I look at both of them, right? And then we can see if you've got, too many bad species in there and not enough good species. So it's really about getting the actual information in line first, and then we kind of work backwards from the problem. A lot of people don't make enough HCl, or they're not breaking down protein properly to where they have, it's called indican. So you can have a positive indican. So we look at all these markers, right? And we can really see what's going on in your gut. But I think a lot of it comes from just not eating in alignment with your assignment. Do you agree, or do you have different strategies that you kind of start at?
Well, actually, I mean, how you go about doing that is, first of all, brilliant. I love the, broad to more specific. And the way that I usually word it, it's like, we're clearing the muddy waters, seeing what we're working with. It's like, let's deal with some of the low-hanging fruit. Let's, strengthen the foundations. That's why, 3 main things that I look at first with my client. Are they sleeping? Are they pooping? And is their blood sugar regulated? Get those cleaned up. It clears the muddy waters. Then you can see, okay, are you still having problems? Now let's dive in. Now let's see those more specific things we need to handle, because a lot of the issues will work themselves out downstream by cleaning those 3 major things up. So, and I will tell you, I've got a handful of clients, and thank you, Sage, for commenting in the comments. Never underestimate a great poop. Seriously, it's just, I've had clients go, oh my gosh, I have never had such good poop in my entire life. And they're in their 60s and they feel absolutely wonderful, more energy, more, clarity in mind, cognitive functioning, just overall feeling better because they're getting the toxins out. So, it just, not to mention, and I know this is a little tangential offshoot, but I know this very specifically because if anyone has low back pain or deals with back pain, and I will tell you that 80 to 90% of all human beings will have or experience some sort of low back pain at some point in their life. That's actually what my PhD thesis and dissertation were about. And the thing is that when you have chronic back pain, when you are on medications, especially pain meds, they cause constipation. They back you up something awful. And I'm sure many of you can, resonate and understand that if you've had to be on pain meds. And so not pooping puts more pressure on those nerves in your low back, which only exacerbate the pain. So, that's one of the things that I ask clients, to get their history, if they are having back pain, if they are having these problems, it's like, have you pooped? And are you moving, your stools are, and working on, but again, get the foundations done, then start dialing in. And I do have to say, when it comes to stress, chronic stress depletes key methylation cofactors: methylfolate, okay, your B9, methylcobalamin, your B12, trimethylglycine, magnesium, choline, okay? When these nutrients are used up too fast, methylation function declines. That affects everything from mood to detoxification. So, if you are having signs of stress-driven methylation depletion, things like, wired but tired, brain fog, difficulty focusing, increased sensitivity to toxins, mood swings, anxiety, depressive symptoms, poor recovery from exercise or illness. Now, this is not diagnostic. This is a starting point to start asking the questions. And a lot of times when you are feeling this way, again, you don't have the brain power, you don't have the energy to try to figure this out. All the more that get those that do understand to be on your team to help you figure it out, because that's what we do. And, we have so many clients who have been helped to move out of that state. Of course, they put in the work. They're the ones doing the hard work and actually implementing the recommendations that we're talking about. And so you also have to be there to be willing to do these things, but it is achievable, and we got you.
Yeah, and we can get into some pretty tremendous detail as well once we have your DNA 360. And by the way, there's only a couple days left where there is a deal going on with that. There's $65 off of your DNA 360. Just if any of you haven't done it yet, I can't recommend it enough, especially for methylation, right? Because we can always make general recommendations about, well, yeah, you probably shouldn't eat fast food. Yeah, you probably shouldn't smoke. Yeah, you should probably get a good night's sleep. But when we have your DNA 360, we can actually go into MTHFR, SHMT1, MTR, MTRR, FUT2, COMT. We can see what all of these enzyme speeds are actually at, right? And that's when we can get a little bit more hyper detailed with regard to, B vitamin supplementation and things that really support the methylation cycle. You're not going to know that if you don't get your genes tested. And that's why we live in this realm of specificity. There's general recommendations any health coach can make, and that's great. But the genes really steer the boat and give us an opportunity to be a lot more detailed. So I can't recommend it enough. And between that and maybe pairing it with Gut 360, maybe pairing it with DNA aging, now we're talking. Right now we have a whole bunch of information about you, not ex Instagram influencer, you and your body, right? So detail matters a lot here when it comes to methylation.
And I want to circle back around, kind of piecing together methylation, stress, epigenetics, okay? Because stress alters DNA methylation, okay? We've already talked about some of this, but remember, DNA methylation controls gene expression. Chronic stress can turn on pro-inflammatory and disease-related genes that can increase risk of cardiovascular disease, depression, anxiety, neurodegenerative disease, cancer, chronic illness. The list goes on, okay? And when you're talking about long-term effects of stress on DNA methylation, traumas, prolonged stress can actually cause like epigenetic scars. This can make it harder for the body to return back to a baseline health. And, research has shown that prenatal or childhood stresses can impact methylation patterns for life, affecting mental health, affecting stress resilience. But it's not the end of the world. And can we, work back and heal some of that? Yes, but you got to know, where are your weak points? What type of B vitamins should you be taking? As far as, if you have a dysregulated methylation pathway, how do you specifically support that? And this is where the personalized medicine can come in, of going, okay, well, we know that we need to give you some B vitamins. So, for folate, can you take a methylated form? Do you need to take the adenylylated form, like folinic acid? For cobalamin, B12, do you need to take the methylated, or can you take the methylated form, or do you need to take the adenylylated form? And then you also need the other full suite of B vitamins and trimethylglycine and some of these others. There's a paper that had come out about riboflavin and methyl tetrahydrofolate reductase, MTHFR, okay? And this actually talked about the importance of how B2, riboflavin, is to the methylation pathway, because MTHFR, being the enzyme, okay, needed to turn folic acid into methylfolate so the body can actually use it, B2 actually helps with that. It is what the body uses to add the methyl groups to the folic acid, then turning it into methylfolate. So it's not just about B9 and B12. You've got to have the full suite of B vitamins. And so it's also where we don't want you to just jump to supplements, because they should remain as they are, supplements. We want to get into foods, whole foods. So you're probably thinking, okay, what kinds of foods have these B vitamins? Well, great question. Methylfolate, B9, leafy greens, liver, okay? Those are a couple of things. B12, cobalamin, grass-fed meats, eggs, okay? Trimethylglycine, this would be like beets, quinoa, choline, eggs, liver. You can see how there's some overlap here. Magnesium. Well, magnesium is a lot of things. Chocolate. Anyway, so they're in a lot of foods. And, honestly, guys, all you have to do is Google foods that have magnesium, foods that have choline, foods that have, it'll give you a list. And if you need something a little bit more specific, based on your genes, what you can eat, sensitivities, things that we have spoken about before in previous webinars, work with someone, work with a nutritionist, work with a health coach that has some knowledge about this, that can help really curate the specific diet for you, and at least the foods for you, to make sure your body is getting the nutrients you need to help support not just methylation, but your other detox pathways or other genes where you may not be as good as absorbing those particular nutrients, like vitamin A or E or zinc or C or something else. So really focus on foods first, lifestyle, doing the low-hanging fruit and these foundational aspects. So
yeah, I'm a big fan of the organ capsules. Honestly, that's a really magical thing to add in there, because not a lot of us really want to source them and cook them and do the whole thing. And now, you can just get them in capsule form. It's freeze dried, it's desiccated, so it hasn't lost any of its nutrient availability there. But you can get them in combos where you get like liver and heart and pancreas and kidney, all within capsules. And so, every maybe 3 times a week or so, I take a handful of these capsules, and it's really covering a ton of nutritional bases all at once. And, there's this theory that flesh absorbs into flesh very well. It doesn't have to change it around so much as it might have to with plants. So just getting those types of things in is great, because it is still a whole food source. It's like a food supplement as opposed to a synthetic vitamin. And the more that you can accomplish that, the better, in my opinion. Yeah.
So We've got some wonderful questions that have come in, and maybe we can jump over and start answering some of those. And actually, there's a very quick question by Marianne who asked, where on the DNA 360 is the methylation pathway located? It's in your anti-inflammatory reports. So when you go into the anti-inflammation reports, you'll have your sub-reports, and one of them is strictly on methylation. You'll also have one on glutathionization, you'll have one on D3, you'll have one on antioxidation, but it's right in there, so you can actually go and take a look. So we've got a question from, okay, I want to pronounce this right.
Pressure's on, Dr. Laura. That's a difficult one to pronounce.
Malgorzata. I hope I pronounced that. I do
That's
apologize if I totally butchered it. And she's saying that she has the MTHFR C677T mutation. And when she consulted with a methylation specialist, that specialist suggested the supplement of methylfolate and methylcobalamin. But when she got her DNA 360, she said her SHMT1 is AG version and MTR is also an AG version. And she got suggestions from us not to supplement with the methylated versions of folate and cobalamin. And now she's confused and will be happy to learn more about what she should do. So, Justin, can you enlighten her about the subcategories and other genes in that pathway?
Yeah, so it's so nuanced, right? Because I mean, MTHFR, first of all, there's also a second SNP that we check. So we don't just check for the one, and really both of them you want to look at. The TT would be the more suboptimal version, but it kind of has to bounce off of the other one. So if you do know what your other MTHFR is, that may influence the answer. So if your gene test wasn't with us, then you may just want to inquire about that. But MTHFR is really just an earlier stage, and it passes that baton on to SHMT1. So that's what we do, is we look at it as a whole pathway, and that's what gives us our recommendations, to where we don't always want to add the support of that methyl group, because then you can overall over-methylate, right? So it's really hyper detailed, and it's a step-by-step thing. And when you have the AG variant for Schmidt1 and you have the AG for MTR as well, that's when we typically don't recommend having the support of the methyl group. That's why we can't look at it as an N equals 1. If you looked at only the MTHFR and you see the T there, then yeah, you may need the support of the methyl group. But we look at the whole pathway, right? And it's really something that I generally recommend a coaching session around, because it's very complicated. But our reports are going to incorporate all of that, right? So with SHMT1 AG and MTR AG, you're going to want to go for the non-methylated and the more adenosyl or folinic acid in the case of B9. For B12 as well, you're not only going to want to look at MTR, you're going to want to look at one called FUT2. That's one that we look at in our reports, because it really translates to whether or not your body can use B12 in a normal capsule form, or if you need it in more of a sublingual or an intravenous manner. So have a look at that as well if you have done our reports.
And I do want to add other things that you want to look at. Check your homocysteine levels. You know, if you have had them checked in the past before supplementation, or you know, if that was even on your radar. If it wasn't, not a big deal. But if you have been taking, say, the methylated forms, then, you know, how are your homocysteine levels? You know, how are you feeling? Because there are things that can occur with overmethylation, and you need to be careful of that. And things like anxiety and heart palpitations and different types of things. Not saying that it has to be that dramatic, but that, you know, those are a couple of symptoms for overmethylation. So, you know, it's not the end of the world if you did take a methylated form, but you also want to be aware of why this is important, why we look at these other genes to further look at and personalize, okay, it's not just you need cobalamin and folate, but the forms being important. And it really gets down to the enzymatic activity and how that can impact the rest. And this is what Justin was saying. This is where a consultation could be very helpful, because we could dig deeper, dive deeper into this and really explain the nuances behind it. But thank you so much, Justin, for that. It's really important for people to understand, because we really want to clear the confusion, because there isn't any reason to be, confused about it. And that's certainly not where we want any of our audience to be. So
Yeah, well, then let me just say too, oftentimes I know it's, people probably roll my eyes because some of these questions I end up just saying, I recommend a coaching session. But the reason why is because there's something called clinical correlation that really matters. And without having met you and then to just read a question and answer it, it's like, I need to know what your diet's like, because, like, are you on a plant-based diet, or are you getting a lot of B12 and things through meat? I need to look at the rest of your detox patterns and what your lifestyle is like, so that I can treat the person instead of the report. So that's why I say that, just so everybody knows. It's like I prefer being a little bit more detailed. So I give the best recommendations I can on these webinars, but really getting to know you through a coaching session gives me way, way more ammunition to go off of.
yeah, and we are here to support, but you also it's also important for our audience to know that we don't have all of each of their background. I mean, some of them, because they are clients, but for the most part, we don't know your history. We don't have your labs. We don't know. And all of these important things that we would normally have in our arsenal to be able to be more direct in the recommendations that we give and to be much more personalized. The information that we are talking about in these webinars has to be more general, because we don't have those things. And also for the fact that, for example, even though I am a doctor, I'm not your doctor. Again, some of you are clients, but even then, they know the limitations and what can and cannot be done. So really, this is more for education, more theoretical. Hey, this is what we've seen, but to actually be a direct recommendation, we can't really go there. Again, unless you're a client, and that's why we say, take a look at our programs, work with one of us, so we can really give you the dedicated, personalized experience, knowledge, and recommendations that you truly deserve.
Absolutely.
So going on to our next question, Diane is saying, might ADHD be related to poor methylation? If that is the case, we should be dealing with it in an entirely different way rather than throwing people on Adderall, right? And okay, kind of did my disclaimer just a moment ago. And I would tend to agree, simply because my son, when he was young, was diagnosed with ADHD. And of course, he's 32 now. Way back then, I didn't know what I know now. We didn't have the knowledge of DNA that we have now. And would I have loved to have him not go on the medication? Yes. Did he? Yes. But it's the only thing I knew at the time. And with the research and with the understanding of the methylation pathway and things that we've already talked about tonight, especially how methylation directly affects the neurotransmitters, dopamine, serotonin, norepinephrine, etc., not to mention detoxification, brain function. We've already walked through that. ADHD can be linked to poor methylation due to those things. Okay, so if methylation is impaired, neurotransmitter balance, impulse control, focus, emotional regulation can all suffer. Now, am I saying that whomever you are talking about, that this is the case? No, because I don't know their case. But is this a theory, a possibility? Yes. So when you consider that how methylation can affect these things, mood, impulse control, focus, all of these things, that supporting methylation could be a better long-term strategy than relying solely on a stimulant medication like Adderall. Okay. Something that can increase dopamine. Adderall does increase dopamine, but doesn't address the underlying methylation imbalances. And again, personal anecdotal situation, my son, he didn't like being on the medication. And so in college, and I mean, he was diagnosed with it when he was young. I mean, it took a few years to diagnose him, but all through, the rest of his elementary, middle school, high school, and into early college, he was on the medication and he hated it. And so he got off of it. And it was a difficult transition. He did it, and he's wonderful. He's doing great now. Of course, he also knows more about nutrition and supplementation and, all of these other things. He, is a respiratory therapist, working at hospitals, and is absolutely brilliant. And I love him. And of course, there's my soapbox for my son. But the thing is, it's like, don't rule out the possibility. And again, this is where supporting the body with the nutrients that are needed to make sure that these pathways are working as optimally as they can based on the genetic profile the person has. Because you can upregulate, you can downregulate, you can adjust that. That is what epigenetics is about. It's manipulating the environment outside of you, inside of you, to control the genetic expression. So there we go.
Yeah, well, I think that really highlights a broader problem with medicine and what it is, right? Because that's really common. I went to the doctor at age 13 because I had an acne problem, and he put me on antibiotics, and he kept me on antibiotics from age 13 to age 17, which is really a bad thing to do. And at no point was I asked about my hydration tactics, my diet, anything about my lifestyle. That wasn't even part of the conversation. It was just like, okay, you have this issue. I'm going to prescribe you this, and I hope it works. And it did for a little bit, right? But the requisite damage, it took me a long time to repair that. Like all of puberty, I was on antibiotics. You know how bad that is? And it wasn't even recommended to balance it out with a probiotic. And so, I'm not against the use of pharmaceutical interventions. I think that there's a lot of brilliant science that's gone into drugs. However, we have to zoom out a little bit, and we have to restore the body's innate intelligence. Like the body's very smart and it knows what it's supposed to do, but sometimes it needs a little encouragement, and the lifestyle factors are always where we need to start. We need to shore up micronutrient deficiencies, and we have to improve inflammatory response and get your epigenetics really dialed in, as opposed to just jumping on a drug that is going to absolutely target that last end result of it, right? That's this general to specific thing that I'm always talking about. Drugs are really, really specific, right? And they can also have other effects that are not so favorable. So we need to start with generalities. If you have ADHD, I mean, maybe you just need to get your vitamin D on point and get some exercise going and make sure you're on the right diet, etc. And maybe that clears up 80% of it for a lot of people, and if it hasn't, then we can have a conversation about drugs. But that should not be the first conversation we have. It should be a later conversation once we've got everything else dialed in.
And yeah, underscore that. I mean, I honestly have done some deep dives into ADHD, obviously, because of my son. I could probably do a whole webinar just on, ADHD, methylation, and brain function and all the things. So just know that there is information out there. There is research out there. It's come a long way in the 32 years that I've had to, deal with it with my son. So yes, again, there's always hope. There's always more information out there.
Yeah.
All right. Our next question is from Mary. And she says glutathione, according to I'm not sure how to pronounce that. It's a healing center in the Ukraine, is best, or saying that from the healing center, it's best to import from Ukraine, as the glutathione in the US has added ingredients that are not optimal. Can you comment?
I know that a lot of places in Europe do have, like, there's places that have higher standards when it comes to supplement efficacy and things. Um, I don't think that that means that every single supplement that you could get that's glutathione from the United States is automatically poor and has added ingredients in there. I think that it's really important to look at the ingredient list of any supplement or medication that you would take. And I'm aware of some, from the United States that, as far as I can tell, are pretty good. And there's a lot of ways that you can take glutathione as well, right? Like, you can actually nebulize it. You can do transdermal glutathione. There's liposomal glutathione. So there's a lot of kind of categories to it. But I'm not familiar with any like baseline as far as like this country does it better than this one. Do you have any insight on that?
No, actually, well, not specifically to what she's commenting about. I would actually reiterate what you're talking about, in that, I mean, as far as the glutathione, they're not all the same. Just like you can't say all meat is the same. No, there's a lot of differences. And really, you want to look at the when you are discerning if you are going to be doing or taking a glutathione supplement, consider the following things: purity and additives. So look at the list of ingredients for like fillers, binders, artificial additives, anything that can affect the supplement's efficacy or could cause adverse reactions in and of themselves. Looking what you've already talked about, bioavailability, for example, in whether it is in liposomal form, because that's designed to enhance the absorption. There's IV. I've got several clients who do IV pushes of glutathione. Of course, we always double check to make sure that their genetics, their bodies can handle glutathione in that form. And, I mean, there's transdermal. There's a lot of different ways. So look for products that have third-party testing. Make sure that they are meeting quality and purity standards. And they will, if they are honest, good companies, if you don't see it right away, you can call them and say, hey, do you have third-party testing? Or I'd like to see some of those things. If they are not forthright and going, sure, here it is, then I'd walk away. Because if they are on the up and up, if they are reputable, they will have that, they will provide it to you. And then also look at, like the manufacturer's reputation. First of all, where are they? Where are they sourcing their raw materials? And, how are their manufacturing practices? Be a knowledgeable, discerning consumer. So that's where I would let that go. And that goes with any supplement, not just glutathione, obviously.
Yeah, agreed.
All righty. Barbara has quite a long comment about a friend. Hang on, let me just kind of look through here because I don't want to necessarily read all of it out loud. The friend had a stroke a couple years ago, with residual pain, immobility, speech difficulty, vegetarian influenced by husband, daughter, lost 80 pounds a long time ago. Fantastic. The importance, okay. Cyanocobalamin. Okay, so it looks like commenting about cyanocobalamin, obviously having one cyanide molecule, and having it to go through different conversions to then get methylated. So the family member seems to think that since serum B12 comes back normal, that everything is fine by taking the cyanocobalamin. And she reads it more stable, meaning that, at least from my interpretation here, that this friend who had the stroke is taking cyanocobalamin. Since the labs are looking normal, the family is like, okay, everything's good. And she wants, the daughter wants more studies. So, okay, just to say, there are studies and information out there at my fingertips right at the second. I don't have them. I'd actually have to pull them up. But I will suggest that you could even go on to PubMed. You could take a look and just do different searches for cyanocobalamin health, or some sort of combinations, and doing some searches, and you'll be able to find some things. I mean, I could even do a quick search after, and if you send if you email our client care, they can forward it to me, and then I can give them papers, and then they can forward it to you. So if we can pop that in the chat, the information, the email for that, then we will get her helped out.
Yeah, and I do think that generally cyanocobalamin is not a great recommendation. I mean, that's typically the one that they put in, the Monster energy drinks and that kind of thing. Don't sue me, Monster. I should have just said energy drinks. But it's definitely got some toxicity associated with it, and there's no reason to add to your toxin load if you don't have to, right? And in that question as well, she just has to kind of speak to the importance of knowing the genes and what type of B12 to get. And the reason why is because we don't want to just add methyl groups willy-nilly here, because you can, like we've talked about, over-methylate as well. So if your genes would suggest that you don't require that added methyl group and you add it in, and this is a daily supplement that you're taking, you can overload the cytoplasm with methyl groups and you can become an over-methylator, which can lead to anxiety issues, etc. So knowing the genes and then knowing whether or not you need a methylated form is a really good place to start. But when it comes to these non-methylated forms, I wouldn't go for ones that are just inexpensive to basically make it so that you're saving money, but it's also toxic, right? And adenosylcobalamin is definitely a better option with that. I don't know if you've heard Dr. Laura, Gary Brecka's little rant about cyanocobalamin and how they scrape it off sewage. It's they get it from some non-clean sources. Let's put it that way. So I don't recommend cyanocobalamin.
No, and there are plenty of products out there, reputable companies that make cobalamin, forms of cobalamin that are much better for your body. Whether it is methylcobalamin, whether it's adenosylcobalamin, hydroxycobalamin, those are much better choices than going with cyanocobalamin. So putting that out there. All right. So Dirk, hello. Always awesome to see your questions. You always have great questions. Anyway, Dirk is asking, any thoughts on how we can teach the methylation cycle and its importance so it is understandable and actionable to the average person? Now, I will say, best way to do that, using plain basic language with analogies. So, for example, if you associated the methylation cycle compared to something familiar with people, for example, maybe more for guys, and I don't mean to be sexist here because there are women who get into car engines, but for like car engines, okay? So for example, methylation is like an engine, okay, that keeps the body running smoothly. So for the engine to work, it needs the right fuel, nutrients. It needs clean filters, detox pathways, and proper tuning, gene function, okay? And if that engine misfires, having poor methylation, you might feel sluggish, anxious, have trouble focusing, okay? You can kind of get the gist and you kind of fill in through things like that. Working on the recipe aspect, okay? So if someone is like, I don't know how an engine works, whatever, maybe they like recipes. So if you liken methylation, the methylation cycle to a recipe, you can say, hey, This recipe of methylation requires specific ingredients: B vitamins, magnesium, choline. Okay. If an ingredient is missing or of poor quality, the dish, your health, doesn't turn out right. It is not going to taste right. Okay. So, really, you want to work toward basic plain language, that they can understand. And I mean, it really depends on your audience, where you're working. But, as far as like what is methylation, and say things like methylation is a process your body uses to control many functions: energy production, detoxification, mood regulation, DNA repair. Maybe that still might be a little over their head. You could say it's like a tool your body uses to turn things off and on, like flipping a switch. That's DNA methylation, what we're talking about for epigenetics. Importance. Okay. When it's working well, you feel energized, focused, healthy. When it's not, you might feel tired, stressed, unwell. Is there any other things? I mean, again, when you're talking about, like using the fuel, okay, or an engine, okay, B12, folate, choline, fuel for that engine, fuel for the cycle, homocysteine. You can think of this like waste that needs to be recycled. CME, okay, that's like a spark plug that powers the, really important processes. Like making serotonin, for mood, dopamine for focus, or even glutathione. Okay, remember I said that's your body's master detoxifier. So it's like a cleaning crew that comes and clears out the toxins. Is there anything else that you could think of, Justin, that would help for understanding for people, for our audience to go out and teach?
Yeah, I mean, I usually just rely. That's a great one that you just said, by the way. I'm gonna steal that from you and use it. But yeah, I really just say it's just this master regulator and it's on-off switches, like you said. It's we want to turn on good genes and we want to suppress pro-inflammatory genes, and your methylation cycle really matters for that. And it's an individualized thing as well, so it's something that is unique to each person. But I think yours is great. Let's just use that one. The car analogy is awesome.
Okay. So, and in ways they're like, okay, so now all that's screwed up, what do I do? Well, in general, if you want to hit the highlights, eat foods rich in B vitamins. Remember, we've already talked about this, things like spinach, broccoli, avocados, eggs, meat, fish, bananas, sweet potatoes, salmon, eggs. I think I already said liver. Anything else I'm missing?
Definitely all those things. Eggs are particularly useful in my opinion, and the organs, like I mentioned earlier in the call, they cover so many bases at once that's just like adding in a powerhouse for improving methylation.
And there's the fact of avoiding certain things.
Yeah.
I mean, it's your major ones, the processed foods, alcohol, toxins, things like that. But looking more at like B vitamins, like we were just saying, you want to avoid the cyanocobalamin, but also for B9, you want to avoid folic acid. Many processed foods and supplements have that synthetic form of folic acid, which some people can't take or can't process properly because of MTHFR mutations or other mutations in their pathway. And with that synthetic aspect, it actually can hinder the methylation pathway. Dr. Ben Lynch, who wrote Dirty Genes, really has done a deep dive and a lot of research on this about folic acid as compared to methylfolate or other forms of folate. So
Yeah, check your ingredient lists with stuff, especially carbohydrates, because they really use folic acid a lot. And even sometimes, unfortunately, checking ingredient labels doesn't always do everything. Like I was just listening to this thing earlier about Costco hot dogs, and they actually analyze what's in them, and they were just full of plastic and even caffeine. There was like a bunch of caffeine in Costco hot dogs and stuff that is not listed anywhere, but it's still in there, so you can like operate under the assumption that there's going to be extra folic acid in a lot of these things, buns and all that kind of stuff.
So we've got another wonderful question by Nina. And she is asking, what is the connection between vitamin B3, which is niacin, methylation, and homocysteine, and consequently cardiovascular disease? Do you want to jump in and?
Yeah, I'll pitch in on this one.
Okay.
So, niacin, there's a couple things that it does. It's a pretty good regulator of the methylation pathway. It's an important one. That's why we put it in our methyl optimizer supplement. It also regulates NAD pathways, right, which are really important for mitochondrial health. And there's always going to be trickle down effect to things like cardiovascular disease when we're talking about inflammation and when we're talking about mitochondrial dysfunction. Like 30% of your heart is mitochondria, right? So we need to make sure that your mitochondria are healthy. And if you have too much inflammation, then usually homocysteine is elevated in response to methionine. And funny, because the next question says, I have low homocysteine. And what does that mean? The balance of homocysteine to methionine is a really important metric. So I wouldn't just look at one being low. But yeah, I mean, niacin really helps to regulate both the methylation pathway, which is phase 2 detoxification, as well as NAD pathway, which is really important for the mitochondria. Do you have anything to add to that one?
Well, yeah, but the thing is that, when you're talking about niacin in particular, it does work in with lipid metabolism, improving cholesterol levels, reducing that cardiovascular disease. And I'm not saying, well, the risk, not saying that that is like a silver bullet of a fix-all, okay? I mean, obviously there are other things going on, but the question was about B3 methylation homocysteine. But when you're talking about niacin, higher doses can actually deplete methyl groups, leading to elevated homocysteine. So, and some people will also get in like niacin flushes if they, like where you get hot and prickly. And I've had that before when I took.
Me too.
Not very comfortable, does go away. But when you're talking about elevated homocysteine, that can damage blood vessels. It can promote inflammation, increasing that cardiovascular disease risk. To balance niacin's benefits and to minimize the risks, supporting methylation with things like we've been talking about, methylfolate, B12, cobalamin, B6, and betaine, like trimethylglycine, and monitoring your homocysteine levels, which I had mentioned earlier. This can really ensure better lipid management and reduce any vascular damage, creating definitely a more comprehensive strategy for heart health. I mean, it's a matter of test, don't guess. If you're trying out some certain things, then follow it up and see how these changes are taking place. So, all right. We have come to the end of our webinar. I got to say thank you, everyone, for these wonderful questions, for the involvement. We love you guys, and we wouldn't be here if it weren't for you. So thank you.
You guys, you show up again and again and again and ask great questions. And it's, I'm so glad that the interest is still there. Like we're here week after week, and every week I show up like, all right, let's see if they're there again. And every week you guys don't disappoint. So it's definitely an honor. And I'm really glad that we're doing this webinar series. And I can't wait to just keep pumping them out for you guys. And I hope you keep showing up.
Well, I want to say thank you to you, Justin. I mean, again, you just knock it out of the park. You are absolutely awesome. I love working with you, and I will never get tired telling you that. So
likewise, you're one of the best practitioners I've ever met, and that's the truth. Like you're wonderful. So thank you so much for doing this with me. It's always a blast.
I appreciate that. And a big shout out to our angels in the background, making all of this happen. We obviously could not do this without you. So I want to do a call out for you guys. Thank you so much. Have a wonderful night, guys. And we will see you at the next one, as we've got a couple more this week. All right. Take care.
All right. Thanks, everyone. Great show. See you tomorrow.